Okay, so hello everybody, and I'm looking forward to spending this next hour with you. Um, uh, I chose to speak on duality. The topic of the talk today is coming out of duality. I chose to speak on duality, inspired by Anna's topic. I think a lot of you were there last time, maybe most of you. Anna spoke about negative intention. And in her talk, she said that negative intention is the jewel of our core work. And so absolutely. And of course, Anna reminded us of a lot we need to keep in mind to let go of negative intention. A lot of our work, actually all of our work from the very first session we have, and we are invited to breathe. We're invited to come out of negative intention, even though we don't speak in those terms. But in the beginning. So to let go of negative intention, we need to learn it, to recognize it. We need to release the hold it has on our mind and body. Today, I will talk about dualistic thinking, which is what leads to negative intention and which sustains it. So understanding dualistic thinking, understanding how it lives in us, how we are moved by it, is really very important in letting go of negative intention. So, but let me first, before I go more into dualistic thinking, let me talk a little bit about negative intention and remind you that at its very core, negative intention is attachment to separation. It's the attachment to seeing the self as a separate entity, existing independently, moving in life supported by its own volition. Negative intention takes many forms, but if we follow any way in which it expresses itself, we will find this attachment to separation. And most of us take a lot of pride in being independent, in moving in life with our own volition. We all want to have our voice. We all want to be able to know what is right for us. We consider that a sign of maturity. And in a certain level of consciousness, it is a level of maturity. But understanding duality helps us understand that it is also an illusion. We are not separate entities. But we'll talk more about that later. So in this lecture, we will continue exploring jewels in our core thinking. I'd like to start at the beginning, though. I remind you that John Perakos developed core energetics on the premise that it is an evolutionary process, the potential of which is for us to become aware of oneness, to taste oneness. Now, we all have experiences of absolute peace, right? Maybe if you take a moment, stop and see if you can remember such a moment where nothing was needed, a moment of pure silence, a moment where you knew deep down that everything was the way it needed to be. As close as I can come to describe in words oneness, because oneness is in silence. The minute you put words to describing it, you're not quite describing it. However, you all have such moments. Yes? Now, while in the body, we cannot live there. While in the body, we cannot live in that consciousness 100% of the time. We cannot. We'll talk later. I remind you later why. I mean, you know already. We cannot live there 100% of the time because in order to live the embodied life, we need our mind. And the mind takes us out of the oneness. But the core energetic process, little by little, has the potential to bring us to that taste more often. Everything we do in our work to drop deeper in consciousness, to experience more vibrancy in the body, supports this potential. But to align with this energy, to kind of be able to understand what can allow us to be there, we have to come out of dualistic thinking. Yeah, and I'm summarizing, there's a lot here and we have an hour. If I say something absolutely confusing, I know a lot of what I'm saying, at least what I've said so far, most of you really very familiar with. But if I say something that's confusing, just raise your hand. Okay? Okay, so dualistic thinking, what is that? What is dualistic thinking? I wrote down a definition that came to me. I said dualistic thinking is the result of the sum total of images which live in the mind, images, right? Beliefs, ideas, thoughts about reality. So it is the sum total of images which live in the mind and which create defenses in the body. Images which have us believing that certain experiences are okay and certain experiences are not okay, that certain experiences are possible and certain experiences are not. Images that support the belief that truth is absolute. Yeah? That at the core of who we are, or at the core of what the universe is, this homogeneity. Dualistic thinking. No? If I give you my space and I don't take any space for myself, then I will feel love. If I take any space for myself, that means I'm not giving you any space, and therefore I can't be with you, let alone feel love with you, because you don't exist. I took all the space. 100% thinking. It's either my space 100% or your space 100%. I know you all know what I'm talking about, but what comes to mind is a piece of the journey of a woman that I was working with yesterday. She is trying to connect with a man who has come to her life and is struggling with boundaries and going a little bit back to her childhood. She was talking about her mother who has been in a wheelchair ever since she remembers. This woman was talking about how she could not let herself have her needs with her mother, because to have her needs with her mother meant that she was not going to be caring for the mother's needs. If I have my needs, I'm going to forget her needs. If I was to let her know that I need space, I'm not going to be compassionate. These are the words she was using. Okay? Even though she's an adult woman, she's running a business. She has a number of relationships, some of them significant. When she allowed feelings and images to come up, she just could not live with the paradox. She could not. We spent half the session, her asking me, what are you talking about? How could that be? My mother's sick. Okay, so this is the latest example, that came to my work. I'm sure you all have your own. Dualistic thinking, either you 100% or me 100%. Other examples, and I think most of you who work with people, you know this example. A client comes in and they have never felt their anger, and you help them, you work with their energy, you work with their consciousness, you help them recognize that maybe they're angry and that's why they're judging the other person and pushing them away. They do some work, they open their body, they're breathing, they're feeling better, they're becoming familiar with their anger, and then they stop and they say to you, oh, but how can I be with this anger? I love them. Yes, most of you know this example. Either I'm angry with you or I love you. I cannot live with the paradox, that I could be loving you and that in this minute, and maybe I want to wring your neck. It doesn't, the mind cannot wrap itself around it. Okay. So in our work, we do a lot of work with the breath and the body. And of course, when we work with the breath and the body, that opens the thinking. The thinking gets clearer. The thinking gets less busy. Our thinking process gets a little less attached, at least for a few moments, to old ways of having looked at life and the world. So we accept the paradox more. We're open to say, okay, maybe. And even to remember moments where we experience both. Actually, you all know that as we do the work and work with the energy, let's say you're working with for yourself or with a client with anger, and the person really does deep work and they open up their breathing, they have those moments at the end of the process that you have invited them to, where they're able to actually feel in their body the love and the discomfort of the anger or the anger. Yes? I think if I give you a moment, you'll all be able to come with examples of having observed that or witnessed that with your clients. So all the work we do, we come little by little out of duality. Now, I was saying earlier, and I'm not going to spend too much time with this because you all know a lot about this, that these images that sustain duality come from childhood experiences. Partly because of messages that come from the parents. When the parent says, I don't know, what would be an example of what each of our parents have said to us? Don't hurt your sister. And the parent wants to impress us with that, and they yell and they raise their voice, and we feel some fear. In that moment, what gets communicated to us is that to push the sister or to be angry with the sister or to yell at the sister is bad. So to feel the anger that leads there is bad. Not to feel the anger that leads there is good. And so on and so forth. But it's not only, I'd like to remind you that it's not only the messages that the parents give, it's also the fact that at the time that these messages come in and impress the child is not thinking clearly. Children do not have the capacity to abstract till they're 12, 13. And when you don't have the capacity to abstract, then you misinterpret. This is important, it's important to remember this at many levels, not only because we do eventually want to forgive our parents and realize that they were human and maybe they didn't mean it exactly the way we heard it, or they didn't mean it as strongly. We do need to go there to mature and grow and move out of duality, me versus my parents. But the other reason this is important is to understand what sustains duality at a very deep place. In a way, and you might disagree or you might be seeing it differently, what this means to me is that the human brain is designed to support dualistic thinking. by not being able to deal with abstractions till the person is 12, 13. Does that make sense? It's like the universe, prepares us to enter dualistic thinking. I'll talk later about that because it brings the question of duality to our spiritual life and to our work with the spiritual aspect of a human being. But anyway, whether they come from the parents or whether they come from the misunderstanding due to lack of the capacity to think abstractly, early childhood is very important in help us creating those images that support duality. And you all know that. We do a lot of the work with that. We work with recreations. We work with recreations because why does the child go to duality as a response to messages from the parents? To avoid pain. Either the pain of being punished or the pain of feeling rage with a parent. If I am good, 100% good, then you won't punish me. And if you don't punish me, I won't feel angry with you and I won't punish myself. I won't feel guilt. I mean, of course, children don't think that way. It's all unconscious. But this very much is what we need to explore so that, and the work we do to breathe and feel is that work. Because again, the dualistic thinking keeps us safe from feeling actually what we think is unacceptable, or experience, make it a little larger, what we think is unacceptable. A lot of our work. But something that those of us who have worked with people over a long period of time, I know some of you are just starting and maybe haven't really seen that, is that we do the work again and again and again and again, and people keep coming back with the same images, with the same attachment to seeing life as either or, 100% this or 100% that. With different configurations, but underneath the same attitude. And of course, the question comes up is that why? We work with them. Most of the time, we do good work. Most of the time, we stay present with our clients. Most of the time, they are willing to go the distance. How come some of those patterns don't change very much? Right? So I want to ask you, you all B2B here, you've done a lot of work with it yourself. Are you right now, or have you recently been involved in a conflict with a person in your life? Just touch it for a minute. And I'm going to ask you to look at it. If you're like me, you're involved in a lot of conflicts. Don't take the most complex one, okay? Because we don't have that much time here. But in that conflict, do you find yourselves in some kind of either or thinking? I'll share with you my example. One of my children, and my children are adults now, is a very conscious person, very much involved with life out there, very much connected with his spiritual journey. And he has a lot of ideas about why things are the way they are, and they're very deep ideas. And I have a relationship with him where he talks to me a lot. So very often I find myself in a relationship with him, uh, connecting with his righteousness. Right? A lot of ideas, his ideas are correct, but he wants me to agree with him right there and then. Right? The righteousness that comes from his difficulty in those moments to accept that, well, the other person might have another idea. Now, my conflict is that I cannot accept him in his righteousness. Does that make sense to you? It's like he has to give me space for my idea and he has to get it that it isn't always like that. And I go very deep and I start talking to him about how truth is never one way or the other way. And after a while, the connection's gone. And if you listen to our conversation, you say, wow, these two people really, they can go deeply together here. But I don't know about him. I stay in my dualistic way of being. So I took over. I had asked you to think of a conflict you're in. Were you able to feel or to sense where in that conflict you go to duality? I'll give you another minute and then I'll ask you another question. So I want to ask you another question. So what is it that gets you to realize, to come out of duality and realize that, well, maybe you don't have 100% of the truth? I mean, sometimes we stay believing we have 100% of the truth forever, but as we do more and more of our work, we can come out of it a little quicker. You know what helps me come out of this struggle with my son? I feel pain often at having caused the separation. When I have so wanted to have a cup of coffee with him because he's an adult, we don't spend too much time together. And I have missed him and I want to have a cup of coffee. And I realize that the coffee has become, metaphorically speaking, very bitter. I feel pain. And feeling the pain opens my heart. Am I speaking for you too? I was saying before that duality, attachment to dualistic thinking, keeps me safe from my feelings. Opening to my feelings brings me out of dualistic thinking. There is a lot here. I'm hoping that with what I'm talking about is reminding you of what you know and you're filling gaps here. And I want to say it's okay if we end here today and you're left with some questions. Questions are always good. I'd like to go a little deeper though in the remaining of the time, because one of the dualistic thinking, one aspect of dualistic thinking, we believe that if we do our journey well, if we have all the sessions we need to have, if we do our meditations, if we, whatever we do our yoga, at some point we'll come out of dualistic thinking. Not while we're in the body. I mean, we will come out of it temporarily and we will also come out of it to some extent, but duality Duality is an integral aspect of the human experience. Why, you might say? It doesn't matter how much I forgive my parents, you know, well, it does matter, but ultimately it doesn't matter. You know, I have to do the journey to come to oneness. And duality exists in the universe. I would like to, let me give you a minute. I've said a lot here. Let me just give you a minute to just breathe. You may want to move the shoulders a little bit or stretch a little. We'll take a minute. You know, I was saying before that duality always exists. Some of you know that one of my spiritual teachers is Adyashanti. A lot of you probably know him. I remember one time he did the satsang, you know, and he's a very beautiful communicator of truth that helps me to hear, and a lot of other people. And at the end of the talk or in the middle, somebody raised their hand and said, Ajahn, do you
Erena, you have your audio switch off on, so you need to switch it on.
Okay. So in the middle of the talk, you know, somebody said, Ajahn, do you live what you're teaching us? And he started laughing, a very deep belly laugh. And he said, I have to tell you, he says, the other day I was sitting in my living room and I saw a squirrel scratching my screen door. And I told my wife, I wish I still had my gun. We're human beings. Occasionally, duality grabs us, no matter how spiritual we are. And I'll tell you another anecdote before I'm taking some time because I want to talk about some physics which I don't understand. So I'll tell you another anecdote before I get there. You know, I was talking about as human beings, we need the mind. It's an integral aspect of being human, and the mind creates duality. So here's the anecdote, and some of you have heard me saying it. I love this story. God and the devil went on a walk, and God says, look at what I have created. Beautiful wind and sea and trees and people and elephants and universes and galaxies and dark matter, and look what I've created. And the devil says, and aren't you happy you created me to organize it all for you? Okay, the brain organizes. That's its job, and we need it. We need it to do the embodied life. The task in letting go of duality, or the focus, is to not trust that it has the whole truth. That's our job. That's what we're opening up to. So let me talk a little bit about duality as a cosmic principle. Now, there's some physics involved here, and I love to read physics, because when I read physics, it helps me understand a lot of what we're talking about. But my brain doesn't work with mathematics, so I can't retain exactly how I got it. So forgive me, I'm gonna talk a little loosely here. So a lot of research has been happening in the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years in a lot of laboratories around the world, and with new, what do you call these things that look at the universe with new what do you call them? You know, those
telescope, like
the what?
Telescope or
Satellites, with a lot of satellites, right? Like there is this COB satellite that's bringing in information right now, the WMAP, the Planck satellites. There's a lot of different satellites bringing in information. And what physicists have discovered is that they can photograph the afterglow of the Big Bang, because the heat from the Big Bang still is out there in the universe. When they photograph the afterglow of the Big Bang, they've come up with this. I want to show you. I have it on my phone here. You see it? So physicists now have come to understand that they call this the cosmic axis, AXIS, that this is the energy out of which the Big Bang was created. Physicists have believed for a long time that the Big Bang was the origin of the universe. Now, being able to photograph this in the afterglow of the Big Bang, they realized that this existed before the Big Bang. It's called the cosmic axis. Everything is created, and it strikes me, you know, when I see it, because it reminds me of a lot of the ways in which we talk about our core work and energy consciousness coming from a core and moving out. The energies that emanate from the sun, from the center, are of different frequencies. Okay. And the frequencies, and so let me see if I need to look at my notes because I lose the details and it doesn't make sense. Okay, so I wrote it down. What this suggests is that temperatures in the afterglow line up with the pre-existing axis, and later findings suggest that quasars were influenced by their proximity to the axis. Yes? Quasars are influenced by their proximity to the axis. The closer they are to the axis, the frequency, the light is sharper and bigger. Yeah. The axis, so out of the axis, the galaxies have been created. One interesting thing that a lot of you might know already, but I didn't know, is that the galaxies, some of them are left-handed and some of them are right-handed. Okay? Some of them move to the left and some of them move to the right. So already you have polarity and you have duality. Not only that, but I need to look this up because I'm forgetting. The ones that move, studies have shown that, so the universe is divided in two halves from the cosmic axis. In one half of the universe, there are 33 quasars, and in the other 15. Okay? So there's more light in one half of the universe and less light in the other. Take that in for a minute. Right? So this duality, I'm not going to go more because I'm going to confuse you. I don't fully understand. But you can read on all this. And some of you probably know a lot better already what I'm talking about. So duality is not metaphysical. You know, we read the guide lectures and the guide talks about how at some point it was the fall and okay, that's metaphysical. But it's actually physical. It is how the universe was created in a direct physical sense. To the extent that we are ultimately an expression of everything that's in the universe, duality is inevitable in the human experience, as long as we're in the body. Now, in deepest consciousness, at here, all right, I can't make it bigger. Here, there's no duality. All right, and you can say, well, this is energy, but we know in the core energy consciousness one thing. But from this duality in everything that has been created. This is an important point to me anyway, because one of the things that happens to me as I do my work, and I'm sharing it with you because I think I'm speaking for a lot of you, is I go into some kind of perfectionism. My idea of being a good daughter to my mother gets substituted with my idea of being a good child of God and a good client of John Perakos and a good supervisee of my supervisor. I bring this image of this is good and this is not good to my adult relationships and also to my relationship with God, the divine. So very often in doing my work, in going to my sessions, I expect perfect healing. I expect perfect resolution of my inner struggle. And I think in order to really open up to oneness, and when we're talking about accepting all experiences, this is stage 4 core, we work a lot to accept all experiences. One of what I really am asked to accept is my limitation as a human being. The fact that there will always be some struggle that will pop up. Now, that is not a pessimistic thought. Actually, when I expect it, I can then catch it, and say, let's breathe a moment. When I don't expect it, I don't breathe. I go to, oh my God, I've gone to session for so many years and I'm still here. I'm still doing this. Alexandra, you're laughing. You know that one, right? Yeah. So duality in the personality, lives in the personality, it lives in the universe. The fact that it is a physical reality in the universe supports the creation of the personality in the creation of duality in the personality. And of course, out of that comes, it supports, I want to go back to where I started, Anna's idea that working with negative intention is the jewel of the path work. It keeps me in negative intentionality. It keeps me in separation. I go to therapy, I do my work in therapy, I find my, my compassion for people, I find my caring for other human beings, and I'm unwilling to accept that there are those times, and I'm talking about me, I'm not talking about you, where I could take, what are those guns? And go kill everybody. I found myself coming very close there a number of times in New York recently, as the numbers of COVID patients were rising, and as I wanted to come to Greece, of course, there's always a very egotistical thing underneath it. And I was afraid they wouldn't let me into Europe. I remember going to the airport to get a Air France flight to France, and Air France told me they bring me up to Paris, but they're not bringing me to Greece. And in Paris, I had to stay at the airport. I couldn't leave the airport and enter France. I could stay at the airport as long as I wanted. And I remember the way I talked to this guy who was just telling me what he had to tell me. He must have gone home and thought, this is a woman that goes around killing everybody in her mind. I made him, I'm sure I made him feel so small. Some of you are nodding. So coming out of duality, you know, the universe, right? Half 33 quasars and half 15 quasars, the light and the dark. Now, if I accept that, I can then say, wait a minute, this is not about getting to Greece from the goal. This is about you're not willing to accept right now that you are seeing this other human being as your enemy. And I can breathe. And of course, after a while, you know, and I know a lot of you are doing very well in this dimension. After a while, it becomes easy. It becomes easy. And even though occasionally we do all drop into negative intention, the drop there doesn't last long. And we can breathe and come out of it easily. So I'm looking at the clock here, and I know I have to stop. It's a big, big topic. You know, let me take another minute and say this. We do a lot of work in core with the feelings, to release the feelings, to feel our feelings, and that is beautiful, really beautiful. But something I want to remind us all, because we all forget it, I know I forget it, is that when we describe what core is, we say we work with the body, the emotions, the mind, and the spirit. And very often in doing core work, we forget to work with the mind. And if I need to let go of the mind to come out of duality, I need to work with the mind. I need to walk through the mind. I need to do mind work. Our work cannot be all about feelings. So just to give you a little bit, I mean, that's a big topic, and those of you who have studied stage 4 core, I'm sure you dropped into it and you know more about it, and we'll be talking about it, but I'll give you an example that can also give you a little bit of a clue as to how we can work with duality at the, not at the child consciousness level, the relationship with mom and dad, but the deeper spiritual level. When we find ourselves, this is very simple, it might sound simplistic. When you find yourself absolutely certain about something, and you realize that you're being absolutely certain, first of all, you can watch your breathing in that moment. I would be willing to bet you that if you watch your breathing in that moment, you're not breathing. But if you find yourself absolutely certain, you can train yourself to ask, do I know this to be absolutely true? How do I know? Is it the whole truth? This is a practice that I have found so useful to cut down on my righteousness and to help me breathe when I go to my mind to figure things out. So you might want to consider. And after a while, you know, if you do that, it becomes automatic. So there are a lot of other ways to work with the mind, and I'm sure you'll get to talk about them and practice them, but I need to stop here. So I don't think this format, and if I remember Anna's lecture, I don't think this format is to open up to questions. But I want to invite you to jot down any questions you have, bring them to your classes, bring them to your therapist, bring them to your supervision. It's a very, very important topic in core work to address dualistic thinking. So I'll say thank you.
Thank you, Erena.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking forward to getting to meet those of you who I have met before and getting to know those of you who I have not gotten to meet yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erena.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
It
Thank
was
you.
a real pleasure.
So welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.